Hello, Nikita, Stacy, Yvette, Mary, Amy, Brianna, Cami, Jennifer, Vanessa, Jill, Jessica, Karina, Lisa, Sherry, Paulina, Misty, and Sarah. I thought I would mix things up a little bit to make it interesting this week. Thank you for all of your great participation during week 4. It's hard to believe we are now 2/3 of the way through our time together in ethical leadership. Again, thanks for all your great work. There's a lot of great discussion this week as we looked at these two situations, the ethical dilemma and the situation of ethics and training, or ethics and how do we help educate people? How do we help people to see situations in ways that help them follow the policies of an organization? So the discussion 1, the ethical dilemma, is it a conflict of interest? The story of Sue and John, a lot of great insights here. I appreciated the wide variety of approaches that people had. Some people like Amy took a look at the situation through the lens of the duty of confidentiality, that Sue had a duty to keep certain information confidential and not share it with outsiders. And then some other people, Karina talked about the duty of loyalty, that Sue had a duty to be loyal to her company and not to give information to a competitor that could potentially damage the company. Somebody else, I'm sorry, I don't remember who said this at the moment, talked about how sharing that proprietary information could potentially include information about customers, and therefore it could be a breach of trust with those customers, and that could be an ethical issue as well. I appreciated the variety of different approaches too, and this is one of the things that I think situations like this, discussions like this, can help us with, is to help us see that we will all see the situation slightly differently, and so some of us will see some things, others of us will see different things, and this kind of conversation with others can help us to see a bigger picture, can help us see a more complete picture, and give us ideas about how to deal with the situation that might be extremely helpful. I mean, for example, one thing that I didn't think of is what Karina mentioned. Karina said, well, I would talk to Sue, and then I would suggest to Sue, since she's considering this course of action that I think is very unethical, I would suggest let's go together to speak with our superiors. Let's talk to them. Let's see what they have to say about the possibility of you sharing this information with John. I thought that was that's something that I didn't think of, but I thought that's a pretty nice approach. Certainly, Sue would be thinking twice about following through with her intent to do something unethical if she first talked to her superiors about it and they said, look, Sue, this is a big problem. If you do this, you are going to be hurting the company, you're going to be breaking company policies, and this is potentially an action that could get you fired. That would be one way to put it. And since this is all happening before Sue actually goes ahead and does anything wrong, it could be a preventive measure. It could actually stop something bad from happening before it does, which is always a great thing. If we can prevent something from going wrong beforehand rather than reporting it afterward, I think we would all agree that that's always a better way to go. The other thing that I really appreciated about this discussion was that many of you noted that you also saw things in different ways thanks to the discussion. Jill said that this got her thinking about things that I had not considered, and Amy expressed that reading others' posts had led her to change her stance on Sue sharing any information with John, even information that was publicly available. That some of you had the conclusion that Sue really shouldn't be talking to John at all because he's a potential competitor with Sue's company, and that would be a breach of loyalty to the company that she's working for, even if she's not sharing information that's confidential. And the ability to kind of rethink things, to take new input, to see things from a different angle, that's the goal here. Is to expand our horizons so that we can see a bigger picture. I think because when we see a bigger picture, when we see what insights different people have, that gives us a bigger vision of what's actually happening. It gives us more of the truth. So I really appreciated that in the first discussion, and also in the second discussion, the ethics and training. There were a lot of different approaches to this problem, and I especially liked that we were continually probing about, well, what are some of the unknowns? What are some of the unknown details, and how would that change the situation? For example, what is the cost of somebody using these pieces of office equipment off the street? Is it a big cost? Is it a small cost? How much does it impact the organization? How much does it impact the bottom line of the real estate business? Is it worth it? Is it worth a relatively small amount of money in order to have goodwill of people in the community who may well be sending business to the real estate office? But then there's other questions too. Jill brought up, well, these people that are coming in and using the equipment, are these people from the community that are providing references, or are they Kevin's buddies? Are they Kevin's friends coming in and taking advantage of the fact that their friend is the office manager and coming in and using the equipment free of charge? That's an important consideration too. That really changes the whole equation. I appreciated that Lisa pointed out that almost all of us, probably all of us, have at one point or another walked home with a paperclip or a pencil or something from the office, and yet all those things add up. I mean, they add up to a huge amount of money that is wasted or pilfered over a course of the year in all the organizations in the country. It has an effect, and I think that points out two things. On the one hand, this is not completely inconsequential. It's not irrelevant. It's not something that we should just ignore out of hand. And yet, perhaps we can be gentle when we address situations like this, because having probably been guilty of those small infractions ourselves, we can be gentle when we correct others. That we can have a sense of this is that none of us is perfect, and perhaps we can guide people back into the way of more responsible and more ethical behavior. I thought that there was, again, some other interesting possibilities here where Yvette pointed out, well, there could be confidentiality issues here too. If there's a whole bunch of information in this office, like information about closings or information about people's loans or information about people's finances that's around the office, and somebody's coming in to make copies, they could potentially see this information, and that could be a violation of confidentiality of clients of the real estate office. That could be an issue and something that really would need to be considered. It's probably even more serious than whatever cost is involved in people using these things. And how do we solve this problem? How do we help Kevin see that following the policies of the organization is the ethical way to go? And as many of you pointed out, perhaps the first thing to do is to make sure that there are clear policies, to make sure that there are clear guidelines about who can and who cannot use the office equipment, or if it is okay for somebody to come in and use it, it's okay if they're going to make up to 5 copies or whatever. But there's solid guidelines in place, that there are clear guidelines in place. That's very important, and it's not really. For lack of a better word, it's not crystal clear in the scenario if those clear guidelines are in place, or if Kevin's just been told once, hey, people are making a lot of copies, could you kind of limit it, could you kind of tone it down? And it's different whether that's been said to him or whether a clear policy is in place with written guidelines that everyone's expected to follow, and that there's no ambiguity about. And do we do ethical training with Kevin, or do we just have a sit down with him and try to listen. A lot of you said we should sit down with Kevin. We should listen to his point of view, try to understand where he's coming from, listen to what his concern about relating to the community is, and then explain, as the owner, explain why it's important to not misuse the company's resources, why it's important to stick to a budget in terms of office supplies and office equipment, and to make it clear to Kevin that this is the policy, and we understand that he may have a somewhat different point of view, but this is the policy, and if he's unwilling to follow the company policy, this might not be the best place for him to work anymore. Several other people thought that ethical training would be good. And I think that that's a possibility, but as several of you pointed out, not just ethical training for Kevin, but for everybody in the office. And I like Jennifer's idea, not just ethical training for Kevin, but for everybody. And why don't we make this a community gathering? Why don't we take some time together? Why don't we order food? Why don't we sit down, have some time just to be together and share a meal, and then have some substantive conversation about ethics and company policy and how we're going to work together in the most ethical way possible. I think that's a great idea. There's a lot to be said about bonding over a shared meal and then delving into serious conversation. And another point that I thought was great was brought up by Sarah, where she said, employees typically should not be expected to make ethical decisions based just on gut instinct. They need guidance, training, and leadership to help them navigate the maze of gray areas. And I think that's absolutely 100% true. And that kind of training, those kinds of conversations about ethics, about conversations about ethical dilemmas and situations like this, with a variety of people giving input to help us see things more clearly, and hopefully to help us arrive at the point where we can act in an ethical way. Several other people said, maybe we need to do some role plays with Kevin so that he will have the skills and the words to be able to say to people when they come in to make copies, this is why I'm sorry, but this is why we're not doing this, or this is why I can only let you do 10 copies, because this is the company policy and we're trying to conserve resources because we're going through a tight time right now, or whatever the wording might be. But to have him role play so that it's not just Kevin do this, but to give Kevin the skills and the confidence to be able to do it well. So again, thank you for all of your work in the discussion forums this week. I really appreciate it. As you know, this week is a little bit of a vacation week at BayPath. We don't have discussion forums due this week. We don't have an assignment due on Saturday. If you would like to do some posting, if you would like to do the assignment so that you can get ahead, if that suits your schedule better, by all means, go ahead. And of course, if there is any way that I could be helpful, please reach out to me by Canvas, by email. You can call me on the phone or send me a text message. And I look forward to week 5 coming up. Thanks.